Welcome, everyone. My guest today is Lead Analyst Logan Mohtashami to talk about the Fed's turn to the dark side with more hawkish speeches and what that means for mortgage rates. Before we start, I want to thank our sponsor, Trust and Will, for making this episode possible. Logan, welcome to the podcast.
It is wonderful to be here. Happy Friday. Thanksgiving's coming up. It's a great time to be alive in America.
I love it. I love the optimism. We have an interesting topic today, one that we love to come back to, and that's the Federal Reserve, because this week has been we've had a lot of Federal Reserve people come out and be pretty hawkish.
You know, I think today was one of those days. I had to go on CNBC this morning. And when I mean morning, I mean like 2:30 a.m. my time. And, you know, they were talking about, you know, they're asking me about the 50-year mortgage and what I think. And I was like, no, we don't need that. We just need mortgage rates just to get down towards 6 and stay there. However, the Fed, you know, it creates anxiety for them with mortgage rates at 6%. And people think I've always been joking, but I'm dead serious. If you study the Federal Reserve, they freak out. But if you think about it, again, if more people have sex, if more people buy homes, they buy more stuff. If they have kids, you know, how are they supposed to balance an economy? So I said that to CNBC, and then people go, well, really, are they really going after like that 6%? So I show them the clip of Kashkari saying, hey, how are we supposed to balance economy? And then I talk about, you know, how I knew that Powell was going to be very hawkish, you know, here is 6%. And this morning, one of the cranky old Federal Reserve members was like, I don't want to cut rates. And even if we cut rates, it's not going to help it's not going to help the labor market. And it's going to hurt inflation. So you put them all together, people are like, wait a second, there's something here. And, you know, when the 10-year gets, you know, around 4% or even under that, they start to get really defensive here. So I thought grading them as a curve, they did very good on coming out there and basically telling everyone, we don't care what you think. We don't want to cut rates. To the point where we've had some interesting statements. Kashkari said, I think the economy's been really resilient recently. And then we're like, really? Like what data are you know, and resilient? So, but it's resilient. I always remind people that if 1,000 jobs were created, they would say, we created jobs this month. It's 1,000 more people are working. The unemployment rate is low and stuff. So I thought it's really hard to explain to people because they see housing permits at recession lows. They see housing starts at recession lows. They see manufacturing jobs being lost. They see construction workers for residential being lost. They see specialty contractor trades being lost. They see the lowest job growth in the 21st century. And then they see a pushback. And I think a lot of people just aren't used to certain members of the Fed pushing back on this. But if you think of them like I do since the end of 2022, you know, for some of these people, the labor market literally has to break, and breaking for them is jobless claims.
Okay, so, and I feel like that you've said that Powell really moved the goalpost this summer when he was like, listen, if it goes down to 0 to 50% of, I know you're talking about jobless claims, but like if we create just, you know, 0 jobs, that's still okay. That's not labor market breaking. So it feels like the goalpost definitely got moved.
Well, you know what's interesting with Powell? Powell went from the labor market's fine, it's solid, the unemployment rate is low, token line, to you know, there appears to be some softness in the labor market to it looks like the labor market is deteriorating. Its trajectory is downward. So in a span of a few months, he has changed, but the conviction is, do I see them just give forward guidance when we get near the 4% 10-year or 6% mortgage rates? And with no equivocation, they defend that line at all costs, even to the point where if you are, you know, Minneapolis Fed Kashkari, and he says the economy is resilient, and then your Fed president says the labor market is deteriorating, why are these two people so far apart from each other? right? And it's kind of like a game they play with bond traders and everything out there. So forget about the Fed talking to you and me. They're talking to Wall Street. And what they don't like the 10-year yield under 4%. And especially now that mortgage spreads got better, I mean, some of these people, they can't sleep at night. I mean, it's just if 6% mortgage rates brings life back to the economy, as Neil Kashkari said back in 2023, we didn't really have that. But now it's like demand's picking up. And, there's a reason for that because this is all they really control, right? This is the only sector that they can really move the needle. And regarding their statements that, okay, the housing market's weak, okay, there's, starts aren't growing, permits aren't growing. It doesn't matter to them because this is the only lever they have. So I think it's hard for normal people to look at them and go, what are they saying? Like today when Schmidt said, I don't want to cut rates because it's not going to help the labor market. Not going to help the labor market means the labor market is deteriorating. You don't care, but it could hurt inflation. It kind of doesn't make sense to normal people, but if you're trying to get a group of people to talk the market down and get the December rate cut off, that this is what you do in that regard.
Okay, so we didn't have inflation numbers either for October, right? Because of the shutdown. But I know that you're always like labor over inflation. That's great. But what are they talking about inflation? I mean, why are they worried about inflation right now?
To me, they raised their inflation targets, and because their inflation targets are being met, if it was up to them, they would never have cut. The Civil War, the people that are fighting Jerome Powell and that group, they would cut. But I think those hawks just basically say, listen, if the labor market breaks, we'll play catch up, which means at that point they get more aggressive. But it's a confusing games play right here because all you have to do is guide lower, and then the long end of the bond market does your work for you in a sector that has been the weakest sector in the economy that you acknowledge. We call that a layup, but no. And they stuck to it. So I think I finally convinced people, and I show them, the work around this, and they go, you know what? This is happening way too much at this kind of level for yields and rates. Maybe there's something here. I was like, of course there's something here, McFly. Hello, McFly. Can you see it? They consistently do this for a reason.
But also, I mean, when you think about like housing has been in a recession since 2022. But that has so many implications all throughout the economy, right? I mean, like, you're talking about the fact that we lost construction jobs, right? On top of manufacturing jobs. And the fact that, people aren't buying as much. I know you say that they hate that, then they can't control inflation. But I'm like, how is it okay with them that housing is in a recession for 3 years?
They don't care. We said this 3 years ago. We said
I
this in
know.
2022. I said, I think it was like August in 2020 when I first bought it. I said, listen, housing is in a recession. They don't care. They're not going to care until
The labor
market breaks.
Right.
Now, what is the history behind this? Whenever the labor market breaks, then they cut rates. And what happens is housing leads you kind of out of the recession because home sales start to pick up and housing starts to pick up and the construction jobs and that's the rebound effect. So to me, they're just holding that last bullet they have, and if they're still using the catch up phrase, then what the Hawks did this week makes total sense. That they feel comfortable, those sectors that are losing jobs. Hey, we've been here decades and decades and decades. This thing is the first thing leading you in. They're just going to wait, right? So now, can this all change next year? Absolutely. Whoever is the next Fed chairman is not going to go in this route. So just remember, this is the last year of Jerome Powell's kind of reign. So things are going to start to change. And I think by Christmas, President Trump's going to name the next Fed chair, and we'll take it from there. But for now, I think this is Powell's last, get the Hawks in there one more time. And mortgage rates haven't had like a tremendous move higher, but you're getting close to a 30 basis points difference from the lows. And that's what I've always said to CNBC in many interviews. Whenever we get down here, they kind of freak out and rates shoot back up. But this year, rates really haven't shot back up, and the housing data, the forward-looking data gets a little bit better, and I think that's going to be the interesting aspect going out for the rest of the year, and then how 2026 is going to act.
Okay, well, let's talk about that forward-looking data and what you see as we near Thanksgiving here.
Well, it was, what was it, November 9th, 2022, where the theory is that, okay, the next move in rates is going to be lower. And let's see how the housing market reacts, because if we get down toward 4 million home sales, we usually hold the ground there. What happened in November of 2022, rates went lower. The 10-year yield went all the way to the Gandalf land. Gandalf the Grey, you shall not pass at 3.37. It gave us 12 straight weeks. I mean, straight weeks, week-to-week data of positive data out there. And it gave us one of the biggest home sale prints in the history of America. Like 500,000 homes were bought in 1 month. It all fell in there. It was just quite building itself up there. And always remember, with purchase application data, 30 to 90 days out, minimum. 30 to 90 days out is when it hits the sales data. Sometimes it even goes longer, especially if you're a seller. That is, you filled out an application, you're waiting to sell the house, and then you start that process when you sell and buy. So there is some lag time there. But, back then it was very evident. Here, we had a holiday week. When the tracker data comes out, we're going to have one day that's, things weren't working normal. We're going to have Thanksgiving soon. And then we're going to have Christmas. And what happens in Christmas, volumes always fall in the last 2 weeks of December. And then everyone goes, oh my God, nobody's buying homes. It happens every year. The doomers just cannot give this up. I even sit there and go, please do not say the last 2 weeks of the house, of the year is like meaningful. Okay. So that's why I kind of take the last 2 weeks out of the equation, and first 2 weeks really of the year. So in any case, what we want to see is just a continuation of what we've seen recently, because it's the first time in many years that we've had positive weeklies and positive year over years. It's been a while, but in about 2 weeks, we're going to lose all the low comps on the year over year data. So the more focus has to be on the week to week stuff, and not try to weight maybe the year over year stuff as much. As long as the week to week data can grow, and then you trail that out, we in 2023 we had a good start to the spring, but everything fell into that one report. So then home sales started to fall down, but then rates went up above 7%. If we can avoid that, if we could just avoid that spike up in rates like we always get every single year, and just run with it into the November, December, and then January, February, March, then what you do is everybody goes, okay, rates are around here. I don't have to worry about it spiking. Okay, let's get this thing going. All positive. That's a positive out there. We talked again about the 50-year mortgage. I was like, we don't need a 50-year mortgage. We could just get rates down to 6, high 5s. That's the best we can hope for in this situation. We could run with this. We could grow sales. But again, forward guidance, they had it. They could have done it. They could have done it, Wheeler, but they just can't pull the trigger on that.
Okay, on the 50-year mortgage, we just published a survey. Somebody did a survey. I think the site is called badcredit.com, which is kind of hilarious when you think about it. Did a survey and found that, obviously the younger Gen Z, younger millennials showed interest. Almost half of the people that they surveyed showed interest in the 50-year mortgage. Of course, these are people who don't currently own and may not know anything about it. But I do think it's interesting and a good talking point to still bring up, because I know that real estate agents, that loan officers are people are asking about it, right? It has definitely jumped the shark of just our industry and every consumer, right? This is how I had someone in my family ask about it. When someone in my family asks about something, it's like when your dad asks you, like it breaks through the barrier. You're like, this is out there.
Yeah, I mean, first it was 50, but then we moved to the portable mortgage, and
right.
I
don't see either of these things happening. I'm just saying that people are definitely they're like, oh, interesting. I could get in a house then, and you're like, oh, or could you? I don't know.
The one thing I told CNBC about the 50-year mortgage is that the rates are going to be higher. Like this isn't a corporate spread difference between a longer term duration loan and a shorter term. This is mortgages, right? So there has to be compensation, and you don't know what the investor is going to really want. So who are the GSEs going to be fully into the? I mean, there's all these things in there. We can do this just with the 30. Right. The portable mortgage, it's an interesting discussion. But again, there's logistic issues with that, just like the assumable mortgage. Right. There's a reason why assumable mortgage isn't very popular, even though there are assumable mortgage. It takes two to make a thing go right. Rob Base. Do you know who Rob Base is?
Yes, I
Oh
do.
Lord. Oh, why? Yeah, you're an elderly Gen X.
Oh
Why?
my
Why?
gosh.
Why wouldn't you know who Rob Base is? Yeah. So. Oh, bringing back 1987 Santa Monica basketball practice. Those good days. In any case, that's, I understand the headline appeal of maybe a 50-year mortgage, but we don't need, we can do this, right? We can do
And I think everybody in the industry feels the same way you do. I mean, it was unanimous. We found the one thing that people across the spectrum could agree on, and it was like, absolutely not. I don't know of anybody who was excited about
If
it.
I'm agreeing with the anti-central bank movement on 50-year mortgages, hell is not over. Hell's just not frozen over, man. It's being run by Frosty the Snowman and the White Walkers and those, dragons with the blue eyes. So
Yes, and I just have to say, we have gotten a lot of comments. You've gotten a lot of comments expressing sympathy for you and how mean I am to you that I wouldn't give you the 40 under 40 award. We call that a Rising Stars award. It is a very competitive award. And this was 10 years ago. And I don't know what was on. I don't remember seeing it come through. We have confirmed that I was on the committee that said no. But this reminds me, this is a total Ferris Bueller move on your part, Logan. As if you're some we should all feel bad for you. I'm like, I'm not going to feel bad for you.
you were bossing me around before you could technically boss me around, back then, So, I mean, listen, there's a theme here, you tell me no a lot. You say, don't let him say that. Cut that out. No, that can't happen. You're too loud. Stop running around. Don't clap your hands and everything. And then now people say, oh, she rejected him 10 years ago,
I did.
for an
I did. I do
award.
feel bad about it because if I had known, obviously, but I mean, you were up against some people who had all these stats. And at that point, you were,
Sarah,
it's
just
different.
remember, there's only one chart daddy. There's only going to be one chart
I
daddy.
don't
There's
think you were the
never going to
chart
be
daddy
another
back
chart
then.
daddy. And back then,
You were too young for being the
no,
chart daddy
I
back then.
was. I was doing charts actually back then, but
No one should be feeling sorry for you.
it is interesting how you are always portrayed as doing the Lord's work. No, you're doing the Lord's work, or you're too bossy. So that's the
Yes.
marketplace, right? There's Team Logan and then there's Team Sarah,
Yeah,
right?
the people who come up to
It's kind
me
of
at
like the mortgage rate lockdown debate. You had two people raise their hands for you, and I had like 40 for me. So it
But
was
since that time, Logan, I've had so many people come up to me and be like, I totally agree with you. He was totally wrong. I have
yeah.
had many people.
There's a lot of people that are wrong. I constantly remind people on X how wrong they are every day.
This reminds me, we're going to have an unplugged podcast episode coming up over the Thanksgiving week. We're going to do that. That's going to be fun. People should send their questions into you. You're constantly on social. Send your questions into Logan. What do you want us to answer that's not so much about economics, maybe other subjects? It's just going to be unplugged. I get to ask you questions that we don't normally talk about. It'll be fun.
Yeah, and people always ask about the hair, and
Yeah, we can have
I
a whole
just
conversation about your hair,
yeah,
Logan. You'll be
and
so happy.
I don't have good news for the guys out there, man. It's just
This is ridiculous. All right. Thank you so much for being on. We will talk again soon.
pleasure.